It's Vjeux, right? That's how
Vjeux.
you
Vjeux.
Vjeux? Vjeux.
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 Yeah, so the story behind this is I was 12 years old and I needed a nickname for playing Counter-Strike. And
Okay.
I was like, okay, what do I do? And so in French, video games is called jeux vidéo. And so what I did was to swap the two. So jeux vidéo, video jeu, and remove the
Nice.
video part of video and so video. And so it's stupid, but even after like 20 years, it's still has never been in any conflict on whatever network or like service I'm hitting for. And for a 5-letter like nickname is pretty unheard of. So I'm sticking with it.
That's fantastic. I always love hearing the like behind the scenes on that type of thing. And in Canada, we grew up learning French as well. And my line to anyone who ever speaks French is "Je joue au hockey." Well, let's just roll with that. That's a good intro. Welcome to Syntax, everybody. We've got Christopher Vjeux Shadow on today. He is kind of prolific engineer at Meta, co-creator of React Native, Prettier, creator of Excalibur, Yoga, and ReactConf. Quite a bit behind him. And we're here today to talk, I think, specifically about Prettier, but we'll kind of see where that goes. So welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and happy to talk about Prettier or any of the above or like other stuff.
Nice. But before we get going, if you want your errors to be laid out in a prettier way so that you can read them and actually find exactly what's going on, head on over to sentry.io/syntax. And honestly, it's really the best way to get a good visual on everything that's going on in your app, from errors to performance to just even understanding what's going on with your users and how your app is functioning. So thank you so much to Sentry for presenting this podcast.
Right on. All right. So you'll probably, anyone listening to the video or watching the video, you'll probably notice that we're all kind of looking silly wearing the same t-shirt right now. But this is sort of the announcement of Syntax is doing open source collabs with different open source projects. So we are teaming up with Prettier as going to be one of the very first projects, and we're releasing this really cool t-shirt. So this is a Prettier t-shirt with all of the colors of the Prettier logo, which is quite a lot. It took quite a bit to screen print. And then we've got the Syntax on the arm here. And the probably most important part is that $10 for every shirt that is sold goes toward the Prettier project, which is we're really excited to do. So if you want to grab one yourself, go to sentry.shop or just go to syntax.fm and click on swag in the top. And you can grab one of your shirts before they are all gone. So pretty stoked that we're doing this, and appreciate Prettier being one of the first guinea pig this with us.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's give a quick introduction. Who are you and what do you do? I did like a what your background is, but like what's your job? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm like a software engineer at Meta, and so I've been a manager for 4 years, and so now I'm back to IC. And the way I think about it is I'm basically trying to help people like be more productive. And one of the very interesting thing when I transitioned to being a manager is I thought when I joined the company that like, hey, software engineers are the best, like manager sucks, like power like to the people and everything. But one thing I quickly realized is that in practice, like the engineers are like the people actually doing the work and everything. But I saw like many examples where they were like really good engineers, but they like not working on like something that really worked out like super well. And on the other part, they were like engineer I didn't consider like superstar or like really good and everything, but ended up like consistently delivering like really amazing stuff. And then I realized, okay, what's going on? Like, why is that? And I found out that the manager were actually playing a big part of the equation. And so like managers, like for example, Tomokino on React, like anything that like his team was doing, like ended up like being like super impactful, super powerful and everything. And so this really intrigued me, and I ended up going more into that branch of the world.
Yeah.
And this is so I've been a manager for 4 years, and one thing I realized is that a lot of the how to make projects successful is helping like a bunch of people working together on this. And this is right now this podcast is around like open source and all those things together similar. And so I see
Yeah.
this around open source is like a lot of people start with open source as like, hey, I'm coding something and I'm like creating stuff. But at some point, it transitioned to being now I'm maintaining this project. Now I'm like getting a bunch of people working together to contribute. And those are like all the skills that like a manager is doing. But a lot of people are doing this, like end up like accidentally like falling into this and don't have
Yeah.
like the proper training, don't have like the mindset and those kind of things. And so one thing I found is like actually going like officially as a manager and like having like all of the amazing like manager training that we have at the company. And this is something that like there's been manager for like 1,000 years. And so like there's a lot of like wealth of knowledge. And so it really helped me grow. And now I'm back to individual contributor, but a lot of the thing I'm doing is less hands-on coding and more like how do you find like the like amazing people have amazing ideas and everything, and how do you help them like be on a really upward trajectory, and like how do you get like project started and project going and those kind of things. So my job
Wow.
right now is like we just had our performance review, and I mentioned like I've been an event planner this half, so I organize a bunch of events so people like get to know each other and get to work on like really cool stuff. So
Wow.
hype man is like another way to mention
Hype
it.
it up. That's really interesting. And would you say that that's why you've had so many successful open source projects over the time? Because like Prettier alone is a massive, massive project. I don't know what the numbers are on it, but it's probably millions of downloads a week. But that's just one of like you co-creator of React Native, Excalibur, which is its own business, I believe.
Yep.
Yoga, which is like the layout engine for React Native. Is that why obviously you're a good engineer, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of these projects don't often grow as large as this without somebody managing it and organizing it.
Yeah. So one thing like I realized is that like like attracted and addicted to like crazy projects. And so like this is first like not everybody is like excited by this kind of thing, and not everybody is like willing to take the same amount of risk I'm willing to take. And so this is like one part. But the second part is a lot of times like I'm spending a lot of like mindset and like time thinking about like how do we make this project like massively successful. And so this is like a lot of people I know are like, hey, there's this problem. Like, oh, how do we solve this problem and everything? But they don't
Yeah.
go to like the like thinking like in 5 years or in 10 years, like how do we actually like make it happen and like set the right foundation. And so for this, I spend a lot of my time like reading like Hacker News and like listening to podcasts and everything. Try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out, okay, what are the like things that are happening in the world and everything. And then like my creative mindset is trying to figure out like how to apply like interesting concepts and everything to like other parts that are like problems for me. And so, for example, like for Prettier, the thing I've had like one experience when I actually joined Facebook.
Yeah.
I My first experience I was like, okay, I moved halfway across the world for like the company from France originally. I married my girlfriend so that she could actually come work with me. And my first experience was like, oh, there was a very interesting project, and I started coding and like sending a pull request, the equivalent of a pull request. And this engineer, Yuan Tian, like spends probably like half an hour, like basically like annotating every single line of my pull request and say, hey, you should put like the space there, like the parentheses should be there, like all of those things that like I didn't think were like relevant or important. And so like the first impression was like, why is she spending all of this time? Like she's like super smart and everything, but like this is just a waste of time and like not setting it up for success. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
like my first experience. I was like, okay, like this is a problem. And then 6 months later, like I ended up doing the same. Like somebody joined the team and I ended up like saying, hey, no, you should put like all of this space and everything. And I started like in those 6 months realizing like why it's so important. And the reason
Okay.
it's so important is like in practice, if it looks different, like first, like you're spending more time like reading the code and like understanding, but this
Yeah.
is like only like part of the story. The biggest like waste of time is if it's different, like if there's two ways to do something, then people are going to argue to death around like which way we're going to do to use, and some people are going to be pro something against something, and then there's going to be a lot of work like then to like start migrating one way to the other, and like a lot of negotiation and like people like talking and everything. And this is like this cost felt to me like very expensive and like a big waste of time for like at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter like where the parentheses are and everything.
Yeah.
So this was like my like experience. I was like frustrated and everything, but I didn't have a solution for this. And so it was like, yeah, one thing I'm frustrated, but I just the company. I'm like, I'm not going to like change the system and everything. I'm like, but I like tracked down in my head, like, hey, this is like a problem. And in parallel, like I've seen Go come up with like Go FMT, like a formatter for the Go programming language. And I
Yeah.
was like, hey, I have this issue with this code review and everything. And then like somewhere like completely different part of the world, like there's Go that has a formatter. And I'm like, oh, like there's probably a way at some point in the future to connect the two. But I like didn't make the connection and everything. And then like over time I kept working. And then I realized that like there was a lot of like formatting projects that like started, especially for JavaScript, but none of them went anywhere.
Mm.
And so for me it was like, okay, so like I had in my head like there's this particular like solution that could apply, but nobody has gotten it to work. And so for me, I was like, okay, so now what I need to do is to figure out like why it didn't work. And like my thinking at this time was like the best way to figure out like why it didn't work is to actually talk to those people and ask them, hey,
Okay.
why it didn't work? Like why did your project like not work and everything? And a lot of people are like worried about doing this and everything, but in practice, like people have spent like hours and like weeks and like months of their life like working on this. They are like super excited to geek out on the subjects. And so like
Yeah.
every single person like ended up replying to me, and they all had like their reason and those kind of things. And one of the thing I like started thinking about it, and I realized that the reason why they didn't like succeed was not because it was not possible, but because the incentives of the project were very different from traditional projects. So if you think about traditional projects, you've got like the Pareto law around like you can do like 80% of the project in 20% of time, and then the last 20% are taking like another 80% of time. And the thing is, it doesn't apply for projects like Prettier. And
Mm.
so it took me until I joined the compiler team within the company working on a new programming language to realize that for compilers, it has to work 100% or like 99.999% of the time. Because if it doesn't compile or like doesn't work the way people expect, like in 1% of the time, like they're just not going to use it. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
Drop it
concept of
immediately.
Prettier is
Yeah.
like if you start saving your file and then like now like it no longer like validates, so it's no longer like real JavaScript, or even worse, if it actually changes the meaning of the language on your code, like you're going to use it once and like never again after this like really bad experience. And so the bar for like getting something like Prettier to work was like we need to be 99.999% like accurate and like correct. And this means that the way to run this kind of project is you need to have a lot of upfront costs to actually go through doing all of this like setup and like going through like most of the like edge cases and everything. And
Yeah.
once it's at this place, now and only now you can start like evangelizing it and like having people do it and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And because this has a different shape, what I realized like most people were doing it as a side project and didn't have the mindset of committing to this like, hey, I'm going to like solve every single edge case until I can actually make use of it. And so this is where like now I had a good idea, but I had like a bunch of work and I had like other things to do in my life and I wasn't like ready to commit. And so what triggered me, it was during a winter, there was two people, James Long and Peter van der Werf, like one working at Mozilla and one working at Facebook, Meta. Both of them during the winter break like started hacking on a JavaScript 3D printer. And I was like, oh, now that I know all of the things I know about 3D printer and know what it is to like actually make it successful, now there's those two upstart going in. Now, like I was like, yep, this is the time, this is the moment. And you mentioned around like my technical abilities and everything. One of the things I realized about myself is I'm not the one going to create the core, like most difficult part of the thing. Like the way I think about it is like there's going to be like people that are like really good at this, and what I'm really good at is like turning this into like a product.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like
it's that manager mindset that you've probably cultivated.
And
quite
that's
a bit.
why Prettier has such a cool logo and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so those two people ended up working on the like during the winter, and what I did was to like do jest tests for both of them like the same, so that like they could actually compete. And I would like create a leaderboard around like, hey, these are like all of the AST like abstract syntax tree nodes that you support and everything.
Yeah.
And I would actually run it on top of real code base and say, hey, this doesn't look good, this doesn't look good, and those kind of things. And so I got both of them to compete and during the winter break. And at the end of the winter break, both of them were like, yeah, was a fun like winter, but I got to go back to my real job. So see you. And I was like, oh shit, like this is happening again. And so this is when I was like, nope, like I'm going to like actually make it happen. And so this is why I basically told my manager, hey, sorry, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to work on this. And ended up like really doing it. And my mindset for this was I knew I need to do all of the edge cases. And so I basically cleared my calendar and every day I would like fix like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edge cases and did this for like 6 months. And like now at the end of the 6 months, we were like at the end of 3 months after this, we were in a place where like we could reasonably update, like start converting file within the Facebook repository. And at the end of 6 months, we had like half of the file, like the JavaScript files converted over. And so now for this rollout process, one of my golden rule was I'm not going to update any single file myself. And the reason I did this is because like formatting was so like visceral to people, like to their identity and everything. Like I didn't want to impose anything on them. And for me, the measure of success is for the project to be so good that people by themselves are going to update their own code base. And so this basically set the standard like super, super high. So like if we succeeded was because the project was good and not because I forced it on anybody.
Okay, so you didn't just make a big commit where you updated 300,000 files of Facebook's repo.
Yeah, and so in practice, now like my role shifted away from like myself coding everything to now like basically being like a manager, like a product manager. Is now we need a lot of integration. So we need the integration with like the IDE. We need an integration with like the source control to like prevent things from landing. We need integration to like those like big commits. Like, hey, how do you write those code mods to like update? And so I ended up like getting people excited about like building those kind of things and helping the people that are like actually doing the updates to like, hey, if there any issue you're facing, now I'm going to like be helpful. And the other thing I've started doing is around the community open source. So for the first half, I had like half of the commits of the repo, and the second half I had like 1/4 of the commits. And now like I stopped committing, and so now I basically grew a lot of people to start like committing and contributing and kind of thing.
And wow, that's quite the story. I'm curious what your personal opinion is should you run Prettier on save or on commit?
Yeah. So I would say you're going to get the most value if you run it on save. And so,
Okay, good.
and this was like a very big surprise for me. So when I did like Prettier, my goal was like at review time to like stop all of the nitpicking and everything. But one thing I
Yeah.
realized is that if you do it on save, not only do you remove all of the nitpicking, now you also remove like actually having to manually like format your code.
Totally.
And this is the thing I also realize is that why are people so attached to like the syntax and the formatting and everything? And my theory around this is because you are doing this for every single line of code you're doing, you have to mentally think, mentally like
Yeah.
do it. And so if you do something like 5,000 times a day, like, I don't know, like a million times over your career. Now it's basically part of you because you've done it so much. And so now if somebody else asks you to do something like in a different way, now you have to like fight against like your own identity. And so one thing I realized is that by removing this entire step from your developer workflow, now people actually like stop formatting the code themselves, and so now it's no longer like part of their identity. And so now like changing the way things are is actually like no longer like really hurting their soul and everything, and so like they don't
Yeah.
care. And they're like, oh, change it to like 4 spaces, yep, sure, like changing the config, like update the code, and like, yeah, things, and they don't care. And so I think this is the biggest mental shift I've seen,
Yeah.
and I didn't predict any of this, but this is like it's been like super fascinating to observe.
And do you think the limited amount of options in Prettier also helped with that? Because initially, when I saw Prettier, I was like, yeah, this is cool, but like, there's no settings for the stuff I want. You know, I want to be able to wrap my arrays of 4 items per line, which I still want. But a lot of the things I'm just like, well, that's the settings. I guess I just better accept it. Do you think
Mm.
that helped the adoption of it?
So I think it helped a bit, but there's a lot of like people like being like super like zealot about like the option and everything. For
Yeah.
me, the biggest constraint was the actual implementation. And so I personally was not sure that I could actually build like a really good Pretty printer for like one proper like standards. And so like my goal was like, okay, before we add any option and everything, like let's
Yeah.
make sure it works for like one specific set of options. And at the end of the day, like we've been able to do it once one, but the issue is like all of like it was really hard, and like there's a bunch of like things hard coded, and so like one is like hard to generalize. The second one is in practice for the options. One of the things is like each option like adds a lot of complexity, not only like for the internal implementation, but also for like when you start deploying it. Now like your like VS Code has a different set of option than like your like source control integration, or like your like merging like two repos together, and they have slightly different things. And so the more like combinational like options you have, the more you're going to face those things. And so my goal was like for it to be like super easy to like add up Prettier. And I knew that like adding more options is going to like add like issues when like deploying in like the real world.
Yeah.
And so in practice, like a lot, like some people, like including James Long, was like, "Hey, we're not going to have any options." But for me, this was not realistic because at the time, like the like semi versus no semi was like war was like raging and everything. And the issue is like if you have like zero options, like people are not going to use it simply because of the fact that like they don't have like their like critical option that they care about. And so like my mindset was like, let's add the minimum amount of options that people are not going to be like, yep, I'm never going to use this project if there's not this option. But anything where like they can be convinced to take the bullet and everything, let's not add an option for this. So this was like my mindset around this topic. But I think at this point, is it actually going to provide value? Because like now people care less about like every specifics of like how the code is formatted. I don't think it's really going to be like what makes Prettier like 10x more popular. So I don't think like I think the status quo is like in good shape. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think like in JavaScript land, we need less options for everything. So this is just one of them that's sort of forced upon us, and we're okay with it. Sorry,
What
Scott, go
was
ahead.
the most controversial default setting that you had?
Uh, I think for the default setting, weirdly enough, it was the curly braces. How do we format what's inside of curly braces?
Oh.
And this was not controversial because like we intended it, but it was controversial because it was really hard to actually implement it. And along this line is like the dot, like the function chaining. And one of the things that a lot of the way you write a pretty printer is to try to understand like what is the semantic of the code you're trying to print, and then
Yeah,
like write like a formatter that like shows the code using the same semantics. But the issue with like the curly braces, like the objects definition, and the operator chaining, like the dot, is that there's a lot of different ways people use and abuse this to like mean like very very different things. And so, for example, for the dot chaining, like people are just using like method call and everything, but people are doing entire DSLs where they can like, oh, you can write your whole SQL like query using these kind of things. And from just the AST, like the syntax tree, it's really hard to tell like in which configuration you're in. And so for this, what we had to do is to have to do like heuristics that work like for most cases. And then some things you're going to like actually read the way the source code is inputted. And so, for example, for like the objects, if you put a new line anywhere inside, it's always going to
yeah.
expand it. And if you need to like re-put it in one line, then you need to like remove all of the empty the new lines. And so this is
Oh,
something that we had to like think. And this one was more like a technical like challenge and like in the semantics and everything, more so than like a decision we wanted. Otherwise, what the way we've been looking at options is we look at the issues, we sort them by like the number of comments and stars and upvote and everything, and then we're like, okay, now this is like the most common one people are like fighting about and everything. So now we decide like, does it make the cut or not? And at this point, all of the ones that are like really like blocking people adoption, like we put them in, and the rest is like, to in my opinion, not really to that point. And so this is like a decision I had to make. And this is like the weird thing about this project is a lot of people like we needed like decision making. And in practice, I ended up being the one deciding like a lot of how the syntax is like being like printed.
yeah.
And so now like almost all everybody is using it. Now I can say like, hey, all of the JavaScript code written in the world, like I decided like how
Yeah.
to
It was
print it.
because of you.
Pretty
Yeah.
much mind blowing.
Oh man, I'm curious. Inside of Facebook, do you use semicolons or not?
We use semicolons.
Okay, so you have to turn that on then for all of Facebook.
I mean, this is the default, but yeah.
Oh, what is
Yeah.
the default? Okay, for some reason I thought it was no semis was the
Yeah.
default.
That's because it's my default was.
Oh,
The biggest default is right now, like this is using double quotes for strings, and at
yes.
Facebook we use single quotes. And my gut feeling is that in the industry, like most people are using single quotes,
Mhm.
but James Long, when he started the project, like used double quotes. And one of the things that is really important if you want to like have the project be successful is avoid at all cost any kind of breaking change. And so we like didn't deem that like there was enough of a strong case to like change from double quote to single quote to justify this. And so we've kept like double quotes like since the beginning of time around this. So
Nice. Yeah.
How do you convince your boss to let you just work on this for 6 months? You know, like
yeah.
you probably have a bit of a track record to be like, hey, like I know what I'm doing. Was it just like this is going to benefit Facebook as a whole as well as the
Mm.
open source community?
Yeah. So this one, like honestly, like I didn't give him gave him a choice. I was like, hey, I'm going to work on this. And in practice I was supposed to do something else, so like my like performance was not like the best given the impact it had. And in practice I ended up like switching team at the end of the 6 months to work on like the new programming language, like well like this kind of work was like more in line with what my team and my manager were doing. And so this is one thing I've learned through the experience and like through like all of my projects is if you work on like crazy, like ambitious project like this, there's usually
Yeah.
not going to be a team that is like the right place for it. Because like usually like the organization structure like is like staffing thing that already exists and like is like relatively like stable in times. And so if you want to like build something new that's like not connecting to anything else, now
Yeah.
you're going to be in a bit of a weird like setup. And so the way I've been like setting myself up is finding like a manager and an organization that like was okay for me to like, oh, at some point like just disappear for like 6 months and like work on this, with the expectation that like if I do this, like it's actually going to work. And at some point like I either going to like staff a team around it or like go back to my main like job. And so this is like a negotiation with like your manager and everything. And this is why like I say like not a lot of people have this archetype, is because like the like companies and organization and everything are not structured for these kind of things. But one of the things with like Facebook and Meta is like, while not structured for this, like it
Yeah.
enables doing a lot of this. And I ended up like getting like rewarded because of the success, like the next half and like for many years.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah.
this is one thing to think about, is like, yeah, you're going to be in a weird setup, but you
Yeah.
need to embrace it.
Does Mark Zuckerberg know what Prettier is?
Unclear.
Unclear. I always ask that when I meet somebody from Facebook, because
Yeah.
I'm like, does Mark Zuckerberg know what React is? And they're like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like he's
Yeah.
he's big into open source. So I was
Yeah.
curious of how far down the open source he goes.
Yeah. So like I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like I've been like
Mhm.
very like had in like a few meetings, and I've been like very impressed by like how like knowledgeable he is in like all of
Yeah,
the
it seems
tech.
pretty
And
dialed.
yeah. Now one of the things for Mark Zuckerberg is like a lot more like a product person. And so in practice, like infrastructure, like the setup for this is he lets the VP of infrastructure to actually like handle all of this. And he's basically at a high level, hey, this is like what I need, like we need and everything, but go. But for any like product decision, like he is going to be the one doing it. So
Ah, interesting.
So before Prettier, a lot of us used ESLint
yeah.
for even minor formatting stuff. Was there ever a consideration to just augment ESLint, or was it just always, I'm going to take
Yeah.
on something new?
Yeah, so I think like my first instinct, as I mentioned when I did like my research, is like ESLint had like a formatter and a way to format. The issue that I found with like the way ESLint handles things is the idea is there's going to look for like what is broken, and then it's going to say, hey, like this goes over the limit. So now what are the things I can do to fix it? And the issue is that if you have this architecture as a construction, now you're going to like figure like what you need to solve is, how do I fix this thing? And then, oh, something else may be broken because I fixed it. And so how do I fix it? And now like, how do you construct a system where like, if you let it run, it's going to converge to something that actually like has all of the problems fixed. And I couldn't find in my mind or in the like literature or like any project that were able to like get to this point. And so like in the like theory, it's called like a fixed point. Is like, oh, you do changes and at some point it's going to converge to a fixed point. And so instead, like the project I've seen work around like formatting code, like GoFMT, like Rust FMT, the way they were doing it is they're going to reprint, like to print the entire thing from scratch. And then this way, by construction, they are guaranteed to have like a correct print respecting like some kind of rules. And so this is the thing that ended up like being like the more motivation of like not using ESLint and like building something else is because of this fundamental way things are working. And what happened, like I think 2 years ago, is that Nicolas Zakas was like, "Hey, we're going to deprecate all of the like formatting rules within ESLint. Use Prettier for this." And
Yeah.
one of the things that's very important is Prettier is just a formatter, so it just like move things around, but it's not a linter. Like it doesn't actually tells you, hey, you shouldn't be using this, or you forgot an await there, or like a lot of things that like you can do static analysis based on code. And so this is like why like the two projects actually should work together, and like there's not one is going to kill the other or vice versa. Like they work, like they solve a different problem. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And what are your thoughts on some of the other like Rust based ones that
Yeah.
are popping up? It's not something I've had with an issue of performance, specifically because I'm usually just doing it per file. But is there any thought to is it ever slow?
Yeah. So this is something that has always been interesting to me is for Prettier, like the thing for me is that I want it to be fast enough.
Yeah.
And for me, Prettier has always been fast enough. And in practice, there's like things that are like slow and everything, but for all intended purposes, like file and save, like if you like integrate properly with the idea while you don't restart the node process all the time, like if you like keep one warm in memory, like it's going to be in like tens of milliseconds. And so like this is fast. And for like when you're like doing code base wide, then in practice, like within the Facebook code base, we can like reformat everything in another 2 minutes. And so
Wow.
you just need to make sure everything is parallelized correctly and this kind of things. And so for me, it's like never been an issue, but people like kept saying like, "Hey, Prettier like is not fast enough," and there's this Rust like thing happening. And at some point, I was like so frustrated about this. I said, "I'm going to put a $10,000 bounty to make a like Rust equivalent of Prettier, actually like format the same way as Prettier, like follows the test suite as Prettier." And I'm really excited because Biome actually like took on the challenge, and now they're able like to get like the same formatting as Prettier. And so now we have like actually like two projects that are like outputting the same outputs using the same configuration. So now from the user perspective, like you can use one or the other. Like I personally don't care. Like both projects are actually solving the issues I like set out to be. Now the underneath like things, this is like in practice there are things in Prettier that could be faster. And also what's frustrating, like I've never been able to convince anybody uh, to um, to work on this. And so like my goal with this challenge was also to like not snipe somebody into like
Yes.
making it faster.
Nice.
And it actually worked. Fabio Spampinato ended up spending 3 months improving the CLI of Prettier, like basically rewriting it from scratch to do a lot less like IO reads and like a bunch of like implementation details. And now it's like 10x faster. And so like a lot of the things that like were slower than it should be, like are now like much better place. And so this really helped like having both the Rust implementation now actually like formatting the same way and like JavaScript like being faster. And so I'm really glad that like this like bounty and everything helped both side of the world. But
Wow.
in terms of like should like Prettier like be written in Rust, like I don't think so. I don't care. But for the Rust thing in the JavaScript tooling, there's a lot of other things where like the tooling speed is very important. So one of them is like packaging. The other one is like all of the like IDE feedback. And so this I think could be like a lot faster. And whether it's written in JavaScript or Rust, I don't care. But like I'm really like glad that like we're as an ecosystem we're pushing a lot on this.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like things like linting showing up super
Yeah.
fast in your editor. That's something that you certainly want. And your refreshes, if you're doing fast refresh on a React application, you want it to refresh in the browser. Those things are super important. I'm glad to see lots of projects in that space.
So I think that leads in really well to like I guess like what does the future of Prettier look like? So we have these Rust-based alternatives. We have Prettier's progress. Is there like a definitive roadmap or anything that is on the horizon, or is this considered like a working tool that will just potentially improve in performance?
Yeah. So I think for me, like the roadmap is like Prettier, like is like working, and we don't have like many like big new features or new settings or kind of things. Now it doesn't mean that the product is like that. And so in practice, there was like the JavaScript survey around like people like that's happening every year. And at some point there was like Prettier in the survey, and the people that created the survey ended up like removing Prettier and the question around Prettier because they had like I think 80% of people saying they were using Prettier, and they were like saying basically like everybody's using it, like we don't need to ask
Yeah,
the question
yeah,
anymore.
Yeah.
So like this is a
yeah.
testament like this is working. Now, one of the thing is like the JavaScript ecosystem is still like evolving rapidly, especially like the language side. And so one of the like pressure it puts on Prettier is anytime like there's a new syntax added to the language or like the extension, for example, like for Vue or like for Svelte or for like Angular or for like the JavaScript language or for like all of the tools that are adding syntax and everything, it needs to be inside of Prettier, because if it's not inside of Prettier, people can't use it. And so like we are seeing like a lot of like pressure from like all of those tools and teams and everything to start adding things to Prettier. And
Mm.
so for this requires like people to actually like work on Prettier, like to maintain it and like add all those features. And so for this, the setup that we have is we have two people that are working full like not full time, but like our main like official maintainers, and are being paid $1,500 a month each to like maintain the library, and they are doing a very amazing job at this. And so far, like from all of the like open source tooling and everything, like I'm getting a regular feedback. Like this is one of the best maintained, and like this is
Wow.
like
Yeah.
very like good to work with like the project. And one of the reason why like I'm very excited about like the t-shirts like sale is that right now we are only relying on donations for this. And we've gotten around like $140,000 of donation over the course of the project, which is amazing. Thank you, everybody. But at this point, we are running low on funds. And so right now we have $10,000 on the Open Collective. And so this means like we are basically like 3 months of run rate. And one of the thing like I'm starting doing is to figure out like, hey, how can we do fundraising for this project? And so whenever like the Prettier t-shirts are on sale, like this is a really good way for just not donating like in the void, but you're actually getting something in return.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're working with a company that uses Prettier, like we accept donations. And so please like work with this and like talk to me, and I can help like do a pitch for like why your company should be donating and like what they're going to get in return. And so this is like I really hate to ask for money, and like for me open source is all about like giving for free and everything. But the reality is that this project is like successful and like keeps being maintained and hasn't seen any like real competition in many years because of this setup. And so if you want it to continue, like please help us buy a t-shirt, tell your like company, or like if you're like doing well for yourself, like donate for the project. Like it's being used for real and very useful.
What you should do is connect the VS Code to some kind of micro pennies bucket, and every time your code formats, drops a fraction of a penny into a bucket.
Yeah, 1 cent per save. Or if you don't want to pay, it will mine a little bit of Bitcoin every single save. How about that?
The amount of time that it saves me in general, I do have to thank you. I know that's like, big reason why you made this, but the sheer amount of mental overhead that I no longer have to carry with me when I click Command S on any time. My code just pops in. Yeah, I gotta say, it's one of the small joys I get every day is that I don't ever have to think about indenting my code ever again. So thank you so much.
Very
for
calming.
that. It's wonderful.
When the
Yes.
code is like messy and you just hit save and
Yeah.
And
it
here's
goes
here's a
burr.
low key awesome aspect of that. If it doesn't format, it's because you have a bug somewhere,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then you save. You're like, oh, there must be a problem. Time to investigate. I don't have to worry about runtime errors because I know there's something formatted incorrectly somewhere. Yeah.
And we should also say that Prettier is not just JavaScript. Like Prettier is across, I would say, almost every language out there, right? There's a CSS plugin, there's PHP plugins, there's some of those are officially maintained as well. That's what you're paying the maintainers for.
Yeah. So the way we've been thinking about it is at first only JavaScript, but then we figured out like people actually add CSS in their JavaScript. So I also did that,
Yeah.
and like there's like GraphQL, and then there's things where like JavaScript is included in other languages. And so, for example, like Vue components, this is a HTML and like there's a JavaScript block. And so, in order for like being useful for like front end folks, like it made sense to like also like support like HTML, like CSS, and also all of the kind of templating language like people are like regularly using. So for all of them, they are like being officially maintained, and then all of their variations. So for example, for JavaScript, it's only not only JavaScript, but it's like Sass and like all of the less and all of those kind of variations. Now, from other languages like PHP and Python, we have like community contributions, but they haven't went through the very rigorous plan of like making sure like it works 99% of the time. And so I wouldn't like recommend like you just dropping them and like seeing how it works. Like it's more likely going to be like, yeah, you need to do a lot of work around this. But the thing that's most fascinating to me, and like this is a good segue into this, is the notion of like formatting your code is not just for JavaScript. This is like for every single language in the world. And one of the things is like GoFMT started the trend, but the issue with GoFMT, it was only for languages, like for new languages, you could do it. But JavaScript and Prettier proved you can do it on an existing language that is messy and like not like well architected and everything. And
Yeah.
so this really inspired a lot of other people. And so, for example, like Black from Python was started by someone working at Facebook, like two rows of desk like besides me, and like yeah, he was super excited about Prettier, so he ended up like doing this. And now we are seeing like every single language in the world like have auto formatting like done by default. And
Wow.
so this is like mostly what I care about is like this is not the default. Like you cannot have like any programming language without this. Now whether it's implemented by Prettier or like something else, I care less about it. And the reason I care about Prettier is mostly like it's working, it's providing value, like almost everybody's using it. So like, and there's no reason to change it. But I like if like you're using Black on Python, like we have a Python way of doing it with Prettier, but like it's less well maintained like Black. So please go and use Black because like you don't like use the thing that actually works for the language.
Beautiful.
Do you have any advice for other open source maintainers that maybe have found themselves with a project that people are actually using and don't necessarily have the chops to manage it correctly?
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting problem. The one thing I would say is you need to like want other people to actually like contribute and participate and everything. And this is like not an easy thing to do. And I learned this lesson when I joined Facebook. I was like so excited, like a small puppy, and I would like work on a bunch of things. And then I realized like after like 6 months or a year, I was like maintaining a bunch of stuff, and I didn't have the time to like work on like the next big thing.
Mm.
And so what I ended up doing is like my manager told me like, hey, don't worry, like just like drop everything and move to the other thing. I got you. And I was very scared because I'm like, hey, like I cared about it. I didn't trust other people and everything. And there's two things that happens. So one thing is that some project like nobody picked up, but at the same time like it worked well and like things were working and like it didn't need my constant attention and sure it like didn't move forward as fast as possible, but it was okay. The other ones like that was actually critical, like some other people like started working on it and those kind of things. And the fact that like I stepped out and let other people touch the code and everything. I didn't like jump in on everything. Like was able to tease out like what were the product like really needed attention and what a product like
Mm.
didn't like need, and also let other people be able to contribute. And before, because I was jumping on everything, like nobody else like was in their mind like they could contribute. And so now the way I've been thinking more about it is how do I put myself in a position where I start new projects where I intentionally start creating those kind of like people like opportunities for people to contribute, and like have people like feel like they own the project, and they can like keep going while I'm
Mm.
like doing something else. And for example, like when I started Excalibur, I created like I first did it like on the code sandbox, and then I created a GitHub repo. And the first thing I did was to create 20 issues around like all of the things I wish the project existed. And now, when somebody wants to contribute, they're like, "Hey, there's this very specific thing
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that they can work on, and they know if they're like putting the time, I'm going to accept it." And like, oh, now they can contribute, and once like I see somebody contributed, I'm going to start like encouraging them to like do more, and like, and my policy at the beginning was like anybody that contributes anything, I'm giving them like commit access, like admin access. And so now they feel part of this, and
Mm.
they want to do more of this. So for like very successful project, like you need to have like some kind of like boundaries and everything, but you probably like want to give access to more people more easily than you're probably doing, and to give them like feeling. But this is like you need like a mindset change around like now you need to like open it up and like convince people to work on this. And this is like
Yeah.
the nerd snipe thing I was mentioning at the beginning, is like you really want to be in this mindset of like, hey, the engineers like they are like going into this and everything. How can you like channel their inner like geek and like to like actually do the work? But it goes both ways. Where like you need to like they're going to like not doing it, but you need to also like be there to like, oh, reply on pull requests and do
Mm-hmm.
this. And then like now you need to also like start giving them more responsibilities, and start like, hey, now like there's this issue from somebody else, can you go and like actually reply to them or help them like go into the code base and everything. And so now you need to start like building this like building those people. And this is something that like as like an engineer that, like randomly stumbled onto like success and everything, you may not have the mindset or like the skills or expertise.
Yeah.
And one way to do it is to ask other people who have been successful at this. And the good thing is like the open source community is like is very like open and welcoming. And like if you're like in this position, like don't hesitate to reach out to me or like to both of you or like to a bunch of people. I'm pretty sure like you're going to get like good responses.
Yeah, sick. Wow. That was really just really, I don't know. You can tell that you've done it because yeah, the insights that you have on just all of this stuff. You know what? I found it fascinating about your management experience and how this plays into it, specifically because I think development managers sometimes get a bit of a bad rap in terms of like, oh, you know, maybe you're not coding as much as you were before. But man, it's such an important thing. And I think the skilled management or skilled, you know, how you can work with people is such an important skill. So thank you so much for illustrating that. Let's get into the part of the show where we talk about sick picks and shameless plugs, since we're just about out of time here. Did you come prepared with a sick pick or a shameless plug for us today?
So I have one shameless plug, like please buy the t-shirts. But
Please. Yeah.
the sick pick is Transformers JS. And so like there's a big buzz right now around LLMs and ChatGPT and all those kind of things. And there's one project by Xenova, which is able to run all of the models, like the machine learning model you've seen and heard, and inside of the browser. And so this project is amazing, and like they're like adding like many models. Like I think right now like more than 100 models you can like play in
Wow.
the browser.
Yeah.
And one of the big thing that they're doing right now is integrating with a new API called Web GPU. And so
Yes.
right now you have WebGL to interact with the GPU, but this is geared towards like being able to do like 3D scenes. And one of the thing like NVIDIA has been so successful with CUDA to be able to use the GPU to do like all of those math operations that are like needed for all of the machine learning models. And so now you're able to like use this directly instead of like the 3D APIs of WebGL. And this is giving like 10 to 100x like performance improvements. So yeah, check out Transformer.js. I'm super stoked
Very
about
excited. We had Zenova on the show, syntax.fm/740, and wicked smart guy, and just like a
real
total mind opener listening to him. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate all your time, all your work on Prettier, and really excited about these t-shirts. Check them on out. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Peace.
Thank you.